Welcome back to this environmental series on CNC3. My guests are Dr. Avery Hines from the Ministry of Health and Dr. Dave Chady, Senior Lecturer from the University of the West Indies. Let me ask you this. We were speaking in the break, Dr. Hines. So we've reached epidemic proportions in Trinidad and Tobago. Is it being contained?
Okay, now, again, as I said, we've reached the threshold numerically that will constitute an epidemic. But the important factor is not what magical number you've reached to declare epidemic status, but really the rate of change or the rate of the increase in numbers of cases, which is why we actually began notifying the public even before we got to that epidemic threshold that the rate at which cases were accumulating was a cause for concern. Now, in terms of containing something like dengue, there's a lot that needs to be done, both external to the household and internal to the household. And the external component is not the major or the most important component because of the behavior and the distribution of the Aedes aegypti vector. That mosquito lives in and very close to households. So if the householders don't take up their very important responsibility, then we will never actually get the situation fully under control. We will kill the adults, but all of those breeding sites, which either Dr. Chady or I can speak to in more detail, all those breeding sites in and around homes will bring adults back within a week or two.
Okay, so are we, in terms of the external factors, are we talking about the blocked drains, the empty plastic bottle containers lying around, the water lying around after flooding? What are the external factors?
Okay, the Aedes aegypti mosquito breeds in clean, clear water. And so the dirty water in the drains and flooded waters are not going to be the breeding sites for these mosquitoes. So the rivers and all of that, it's not the habitat for the Aedes aegypti mosquitoes. So the Aedes aegypti mosquitoes would breed in your drums, in your barrels, in your buckets, in your tubs, those kinds of things. And one of the interesting things is that the water drums constitute 70% of the Aedes aegypti breeding sites.
That's very high.
Very high. And that, therefore, it is related to water storage. So here it is, your strategy has to be focused on delivering water or have water containers treated so that they will destroy the mosquito. The tubs, the basins, and the buckets constitute another about 15%. So the smaller containers and the bottles that you mentioned earlier, those are minuscule. They are not very significant in terms of production of adult mosquitoes.
So what happens to people who depend on truck-borne water for their household needs, and they actually store the water?
Well, there is a fallacy that there is something called a cover, a drum cover. But the way that the drums are actually managed by the householders, the drum covers are very seldom fitted snugly to prevent the mosquitoes from entering. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, you just tip the barrel down, and of course the circular top of the barrel now becomes opaque, and it becomes all different shapes, and therefore the lids that you may want to put on them doesn't fit anymore. And so that's a problem.
So you're saying then, Dr. Hines, that almost every household that has a tank is under risk?
Almost every household that has any storage area for water that is not appropriately managed is under risk. One of the things that we should probably point out is those households that have water tanks, the older ones with the conical, that cone-shaped top. Those, as heat and time affect them, those can actually invert and form little pools on the top of your water tank, which can be breeding sites as well. So those are sites. Your pet bowls, although they are small and they may not contribute to large numbers of mosquitoes, they are another contributing factor. There's all the things inside the house that can provide water receptacles in which Aedes aegypti can lay. All of them add up, and all of them together constitute an important source of breeding. So as we're dealing with the drums, we also have to deal with the receptacles inside the house, and there's water treatment for those that Dr. Chedi again can speak to.
So, Dr. Chedi, what advice do you give to people who have who actually have these drums where they store water?
Well, the most important thing is that you actually have them treated with Tenifos, which is approved by the World Health Organization, and the dosage is 1 part per million, and so it's non-toxic to humans. So it's very, very safe for human consumption. Very often, however, the turnover rates are so fast that it's probably sometimes not necessary to treat all the containers. But those that are going to be stored for a very long time with standing water, those are the ones that should be targeted. So we come to a point where you need to have what is called targeted vector control. Okay, now...
Okay. Well, is that happening?
Now, for the targeted vector control that Dr. Chedi is speaking about, again, that is a joint effort, because insect vector control can make visits, but if the households are not accessible, etc., then those visits are going to be, to some extent, ineffective.
But is it happening, and is it effective at the moment in Trinidad and Tobago?
The vector control personnel will be the best people to say exactly how much success they have had, but the activities are ongoing. How successful and effective they are would be something for them to actually be able to report on. Okay. It's also important with the bowls and receptacles to make sure that we clean them, scrub them, so we remove laid eggs on maybe a weekly basis, that sort of time frame, not once for the entire rainy season.
Okay. Well, we need to take a short break. We'll be right back with more on this environmental series on CNC3. As you watch, do send in your suggestions, comments and photos to cleaningupthemess@guardian.co.tt or join our Facebook page under the same name.
Said it on somebody else.